Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second session of this Communities of Practice on the Power of Parents Learning series. I think I'm just going to get started as other people are coming in, as we have a lot of things to cover today. And we start off with a quick introduction of the Global Schools Forum. A lot of you are already members and are aware about our work. But for those of you who are new, the Global Schools Forum is a collaborative community, an innovation accelerator, and a partnerships builder for non-state organizations working to improve education at scale for underserved children in low and middle income countries. Currently, we have 169 organizations that are a part of our network, working across 63 countries, impacting about 133 million children. A little bit about the learning series itself. With support from the MC2H Foundation, we are running a 4-part learning series on the power of parents. The idea behind this learning series is really to reimagine the role of parents, especially parents who have non-traditional educational journey, and how we can work with them to make them equal partners in their children's learning, especially in early and primary years. We're in the second session right now, which is around building community-led parenting models for literacy development. We have 2 more sessions that are lined up after this. One is going to look around parent community classroom partnership, and the other one is going to look at engaging fathers in parental engagement. But the previous session that we had done was around parental confidence in itself. It was a really interesting conversation that we had around what sort of are some of the factors that either internal or external that impacts parental confidence in supporting the literacy development of their children. We had an around all the strategies that can be implemented in improving parental confidence. We also had an interesting discussion around just the need to reframe literacy, which typically is looked at as reading and writing, to become a little bit more broader, to conversations, to problem solving, and really just a everyday social practice, which we can then use to support sort of like parents in engaging in literacy development of children. There were a bunch of interesting takeaways that we had, which I've listed on the slide deck for you. I wouldn't get into the details of this right now, but this is just for you to quickly skim through and catch up in case you missed the previous session. We also have the link to the first session on YouTube. I've put a QR code here on the slide, but my colleague Tejaswini is also going to put the link of the session in the chat right now. We had 2 speakers, one from the Open University and one from School for Life Ghana, where they presented about sort of their specific strategies around building parental confidence. I'm going to share some of those links with you over the chat shortly, but even over the learning series, we are consolidating all of the learnings and resources. So by the end of the learning session, we'll share all of this information back to you in a consolidated way. So please keep an eye out for that email as well. Before I jump into today's session, just quickly zooming out and talking about the purpose of the Communities of Practice session that we're holding over the next couple of weeks. We have 5 goals around this Communities of Practice. One is just to improve awareness of strategies that we can use to engage and support parents in building their confidence to support literacy development of their children. You may already be doing some of those strategies. So this is really a space for you to tap into that a little bit more and strengthen them. And if you don't, it's just a space for you to learn. We also want to move beyond sort of like the awareness stage and also get you to think a little bit more about what really works in your context. So we're going to have a lot of spaces for reflection and discussion with your peers to really think about what is most meaningful of whatever we are hearing that may work in our own context. Third is really to create a community that really cares about this cause, who can come together regularly, talk to each other, share experiences, and really just support each other through collaboration on this topic. Our fourth goal is around to build a collective perspective for the sector on power of parents, and especially around what is working and what's missing. We want to amplify your learnings in important spaces and use that to inform future programming, advocacy, or investments in this area. And we also just want to contribute to knowledge generation, which is sort of more ground up and more practitioner oriented. So everything that we are going to be discussing over the next couple of sessions and whatever we've discussed previously is all getting codified into reflective blogs and knowledge briefs, which we're going to share with all of you, but also for anyone interested to kind of get into the sector and really understand from a practitioner perspective on what might work and where the gaps are. So that's a little bit on sort of the overall goals and objectives for the COP series. Couple of housekeeping points. One, the session is being recorded, so we'll share the link with you after the session. We do have dedicated time for Q&A. We have 2 separate slots in this particular session, but please feel free to use the chat anytime to share your reflections and questions. You need not wait all the way to the end to ask your questions. So please do use chat as often as you'd like. You can also use the raise hand feature in case your question is more pressing and you'd like to ask it right away. We also invite you to turn on your camera if it's possible, if you're comfortable and if your internet allows for it. It's really nice to see people. So if you're able to do that, it'll be great. We'll also be using Menti in today's session for polls and reflections. So if you can keep a phone or a browser tab handy, that'll be useful. We're also going to get into group discussions. So we encourage you to dive in and engage as much as possible. If you're unable to come off mute, please feel free, again, in your group discussions as well, feel free to use the chat feature as much as possible. And at the end, we're going to do, as always, a short poll to just gather your feedback on the overall session. It's really good to help us understand what's working, what's missing, and how we can make them more relevant for you going forward. So that's a little bit on housekeeping. The agenda is pretty straightforward. We're right now in the intro, after which we're going to pass it on to the Madhi Foundation to talk about their community-enabled foundational learning program. We're going to then head into a quick question and answers with the presenter. Then we're going to do a second spotlight, which is on Learn to Play and Kids Collab's parent playbox, after which we're getting into a group activity, followed by Q&A and closing reflections and next steps. Before we get into the spotlight presentations, what I wanted to do was just conduct a small activity with all of you, which will get us to reflect a little bit on our perspectives and perceptions about community-led parenting programs. We're going to do this in the format of a spectrum activity. So I'm going to present sort of like 5 different statements, and there's going to be a scale that's going to appear, and you just have to kind of rate yourself on that scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree. Again, before we get into the activity in itself, there is no right or wrong answer. These are just perspectives which may be diverse, which are again rooted in the context that you're working from. So yeah, please just be honest and just give us a true sort of like reflection of like what might work in your context when we are talking about community-led programs. Just some logistics on Menti. There are 3 ways to get onto it. One is you can either scan the QR code directly on your phone. Second, you can go to menti.com and use the code, which my colleague will just quickly put on the chat. And then there's also a direct way to just use that web link to access Menti. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen and move to the Menti platform and give all of you about 30 seconds to get yourself ready with the tech. If you can give me a thumbs up, to let me know that you're able to access it, that'll be super, super helpful. And then we can get into the into the activity for quick reflection. All right, so our first statement is around programs that rely on communities can be sustained over time. It's a spectrum that goes from strongly agree to strongly disagree. You can pick the one that makes most sense to you. Just waiting a couple of seconds more. We have 18 people who have responded. So it seems like generally we're leaning towards a strongly agree on that statement. I'm going to move us to the next question, which is around communities already possess the tools to support literacy development of children in early and primary years. It's just a matter of activating them. We talked a lot about this in the previous session as well, that the capabilities are there in the community within parents. It's just a matter of nurturing it. So we're going to maybe revisit that in this session again today, and we'll come back to this reflection point. I'm going to take us forward, which is around all parents can feel supported through peer networks and community guidance. Generally leaning to a strongly agree. Moving on, community-based literacy approaches can prepare children adequately for formal schooling. And the last one is around it is possible to co-create evidence and scalable community-based parenting models. I think that was the last of the statements. I see some people are still replying, but essentially, I think that there are a lot of layers to unpack when we talk about community-led parenting programs. There's a question about sustainability. There's question about trust in local knowledge. There's uh, a question about just role of peer support, etc. So there's just a lot of different things that we need to unpack where we are talking about community-led parenting programs, and that's exactly what we're going to do in today's session, which brings me really to the objectives of the session today. So we have four things that we're going to unpack over the next hour and 15 minutes or so. One is really we're going to talk about the value of community anchored approaches in supporting parental engagement. We're going to talk about, we have speakers from three contexts. We have someone from India, we have Kids Collab and Learn to Play who are going to share the perspective from South Africa and Botswana, but really would also love to hear from the wider audience here on what do you see work and what is sort of your perspective on the value of community anchored approaches for parental engagement. So that's kind of the first big objective that we want to cover. The second is to really unpack into the core principles that make community parenting support models work, and how do we make them more responsive to local context, and how do we make them more sustainable. So we're really going to unpack what some of these core principles look like. The third piece is around just talking about strategies that address common challenges, something that we heard a lot about during the scoping phase of this communities of practice was around caregiver or volunteer burnout, around resource constraints, around sustaining long-term engagement, etc. So we're going to understand a little bit more on how are some of the speakers kind of dealing with some of those challenges. But even if you have reflections from your own context, would love to hear from the larger community as well. And lastly, we're going to reflect on how some of these models and strategies can be adapted and supported and scaled in our own context. So really a large part of this discussion is also to think about whatever we're hearing, does that really truly work for our context? If yes, what are the tweaks that we need to make that responsive to our local realities? So that's on the introduction overall. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass it on to Purvika Bala, who is from the Madhi Foundation and has been running an excellent program on community-enabled foundational literacy program. So she's going to talk a little bit more about the program, the organization, and how they're dealing with some of those challenges. So over to you, Purvika.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Good afternoon, evening, good morning to everyone who's joining. So lovely to see all of you here. I'm just going to quickly share my presentation. Let me know if you're able to see it. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can. I think you just
Okay.
have to present board. Perfect. We can see it.
Okay. Okay. Uh, Hi, everyone. So I'll quickly share a little bit about the organization that I'm from, the work that we're doing, and hopefully address some of the points that Priyanka has shared. So I'm from the Madhi Foundation. We're based in South India. We're based in Tamil Nadu, if any of you are familiar. And the vision of our organization is that foundational learning first, so every child can thrive. So what we've been doing for almost the last decade or so is with system reform, working with communities, working with parents, teachers, administrators on really ensuring quality foundational learning for all children. Um, so just a little bit about us. The the vision of Madhi is that we're able to enable foundational learning for all children, but we're doing this in a sustainable way. And the strong belief for us is that to make sure that this change is sustainable, we're working with the state, the system, from teachers all the way up to your bureaucrats, and also through parents and communities and the local leaders as well. So we're sort of working with two sides of the coin. I'm just going to quickly skim through this. I'm assuming that most of us are aware about foundational learning, the foundational learning gaps, especially after the pandemic. This is where we are after the pandemic in India. We have almost 75 to 80% of children struggling with the basic foundational literacy and numeracy. Um, and so what we do is we work with sort of both sides of the coin. One, we work with educational systems um, to move from increasing access and enrollment to also sort of quality teacher training, data analysis, strengthening curriculum, so on and so forth. And the flip side, which is the program I'll be talking about today, uh, is our program to sort of also tap into the demand side of the problem, right? So yes, we want to keep the system working better, but to ensure that that happens, we also want to work with parents and communities so they're able to um, really in that sense be allies to the system, but also share what is it that they expect from schools, and what is the sort of quality of education that they would like to see delivered. um, so yeah, so in that sense, that's why we sort of run the communities enabling foundational learning program that Priyanka was talking about. um, Before we started this pilot, what we conducted research with parents. We spoke to parents across several districts to understand really what is their understanding of quality education for their child. And by and large, what we found was that over 70% of parents were unable to really define quality education, right? There is a strong need for the child to do well in school, and there's a strong articulation of what that would look like at the end of school, right? Like getting into college, landing a good job, having economic and social mobility, but really what needs to happen in the grades 1 to 5 or and from ages up to 8. I think the a strong articulation of that was something that we noticed as a gap. And we also noticed that a lot of parents were unsatisfied with their children's learning. They were able to share that, yes, my child is not reading, my child is not doing well in exams. But often the articulation of parents about what their child is learning and doing was very different from what the child actually knew how to do. The final thing that we also noticed was that, especially after the pandemic, a lot more parents had access to digital devices. There was at least one digital device at home. So putting the problem and opportunities together, what we came up with was the Communities Enabling Foundational Learning Program. So this project brings together parents in Tamil Nadu. We're working with in 4 districts with around 30,000 parents today, really across what we like to call the 3 A's. One is to build parental awareness about the foundational learning goals itself. So, in that sense, what is foundational learning? What are the learning outcomes that go into this? What is your child being taught in school for their grade? And sort of moving off that awareness into parental agency to think about, now that you have this awareness, now that you are now that you have the understanding of what your child needs to be able to do and what your child actually can do, how can you be an active agent and participate in your child's learning? Right now, this could look as simple as asking your child what is happening in school every day. This could be identifying opportunities for your children. This could be sitting with your children at home and teaching them, or finding those 5 minutes of time to do certain activities with them. And the final thing is also engaging parents as allies of the school system. So I think very similar to what Priyanka was sharing in the beginning. Uh, our hope is that the program is sustainable in the long term. And for that, one of the core elements of our program is that at the end of the cycle, we are able to have parents who are strong allies who are going and participating in school and other structures very regularly and making their voices heard. Um, so that's sort of the overview of the program and what we aim to do. I just also quickly want to share the core beliefs that we operate with and we've designed this program with. So one, I think, is we're looking at parents as enablers. So what we don't intend to do is expect parents to teach children at home full time, where the program is not aiming to make parents teachers in that sense, because we're very cognizant of the time constraints that exist for parents. All the districts that we work in are in rural Tamil Nadu, where most of your parents are working full time. They're working in agricultural related sectors, or they're working in factories, and they're working often 7 days a week. They leave at 7 a.m. and come back very late as well. Um, so the expectation is not that parents are able to spend an hour or 2 hours every day to really teach their child everything that they need to know, but just identify opportunities or places where they can um, unlock support for their children in that sense. The second is we look at parents and teachers as partners. So the idea of being an ally to the school system is not really to identify faults with the system, or to have disagreements with the teacher, but to really understand what it is that the teacher is doing, what are maybe some knowledge gaps that the teacher has about your child that you can share. How can you really work with the teachers and with the other parents in the community to do what's best for all the children? The third is parents as knowledgeable. So we do approach the program with the understanding that parents do have massive knowledge about their children, what their children like to do, how their children learn, and we really want to tap into that as well when we're working with our parents. And the final is just children's safety as paramount. Given that we are sharing material for children to work with, we're sharing ideas for parents to do with their children. Something that we sort of hold central is um, the idea that at no point should learning feel like a burden for the child, and at no point should they be, um, yeah, almost like taking extra tests or feeling like the learning is becoming too much of a stress. Um, yeah, okay. So with this sort of overview, I'm just going to go into the details of each of these 3 A's and how we do this at Madhi. So for the parental awareness about foundational learning goals, we have both physical and digital touch points with parents. Um, First one is we do monthly workshops with the parents. So we gather parents from the villages together, and we conduct workshops. And I'll get into details of sort of the structure of the workshop and how it's conducted and by who, but this is one. And the second is we also do digital nudges for parents. So through WhatsApp, IPRS, SMS for those who are unable to use WhatsApp, we sort of share snippets that are summaries of the workshops as well as video and audio messages. The second is around parental agency. So for this, we do have physical resources that we give parents, and I'll share samples of those in a bit as well. And these are also supplemented by videos uh, that go to the parents on WhatsApp. So they're sort of able to use the physical material without any issues. And of course, there are sort of recognition and appreciation for those who are participating, who are being really engaged. And the final one is just engaging parents as allies of the school system. So, um, one thing that we're very particular about is that our workshops to parents are always happening in groups. So we don't have any one-on-one conversations as the key way we pass awareness. And this is because we want peer interactions to happen. We want parents to be able to leverage each other's knowledge, share challenges with each other, and sort of really build that network of understanding of if there are any common challenges being faced by the entire village and how they can sort of tackle that together. The second is we hold village viras. So these are almost community fairs of some sort. And this is when we bring together not just parents, but also local leaders, Anganwadi workers, which is like the preschool teachers. We have any other like local, in each village, there are different people of importance. Sometimes there are retired teachers. Sometimes there are youth groups who are really active. Sometimes there are women self-help groups. So we bring all of these people together to one place to speak about foundational learning, to celebrate the progress the village has made, for children to showcase their learning, and to really talk about what can we do next. And the final thing is school management committees. And this is the structure, I think, specific to India, where once a month, a school management committee, which comprises of a few parents, a few local NGOs, the teachers, the HMs, gather to speak about school-related issues, school funding disbursement, uh, child safety, infrastructure needs, so on and so forth. So something that we also want to do in light of like sustainability, is ensure that parents are participating in the school management committees. They're able to articulate what it is they want to speak about in the school management committees and really follow through with that. Um, yeah. Um, and Sort of quickly going to, okay, so many activities are being done, but who is really anchoring all of these activities? It is our community education workers. They are the linchpin of this program, and without them, it would not be possible. So the community education workers are hired from the panchayats and villages that we work in. So for every 300 to 400 parents or so, we hire one community education worker. They are onboarded from the context that the parent is in, and they are usually we aren't very specific about this, but they usually do have some experience in some sort of community organizing. They've been teachers before, or they've worked for some government schemes before. Sometimes they've also just like been part of the self-help groups, or they're just very active in their own community and want to do some sort of social work. And um, we they more often than not end up being women in the community. And so what the process or what the cycle for our community education workers look like is they are interviewed and selected, and then they have a 3-day orientation onboarding. This is when we sort of share information about the organization, the program, about the foundational learning crisis, really get them to reflect on their own educational experiences and what foundational learning means to them. And then the first couple of weeks or so for them is largely about just meeting all the parents that they'll be working with, introducing themselves, meeting all the local leaders, the teachers, the HMs, beginning to sort of foster those relationships at the community level. After this, the CEW does on a cyclic basis. They receive and distribute the learning kits for FLN that we want to share with parents. They're also well equipped to use these toolkits to support parents to identify if the child is struggling with any of the learning outcomes. They also conduct the in-person workshops that we were speaking about before. So monthly, once they meet all the parents and conduct these workshops, and they engage with parents on WhatsApp, just doing follow-ups, reminding them about having the workshops, sharing material, sharing any events or opportunities that are happening in their context or in that village. Um, so this is sort of the cycle of program execution done by the CEWs. Beyond this, the CEW also has their own sort of weekly trainings. So in every district, we have a district block coordinator who is facilitating learning for the CEWs, is sort of conducting observations for them, debriefing their workshops, their facilitation skills, conducting new learning and development sessions for them. So they attend these trainings once a week where they're able to reflect on their goals, their targets, what has been a challenge. They're able to share this with their peers and come up with new ideas that may work for them. Um, The CW also becomes a member of the school management committee. So each school management committee does have specific positions to be filled by local non-governmental organizations. So all our CWs join the school management committee, where they're also able to make their voices heard about issues with respect to the school and with education, and sort of represent the parents that they work with as well. Um, Beyond this, what the CWs also do is, in case there are parents in the community who are not turning up as often, who are disengaged, who have other challenges that makes it difficult for them to come to the workshops, they conduct home visits for them. They do one-on-one conversations. They see if there's something that they can do in terms of perhaps changing the timing or location to make it work. And if not, then we still meet them one-on-one to share resources, give them the gist of the workshops, so that they're still able to participate in a meaningful way, and they will still receive the digital nudges that they're able to use. Um, and the final thing is just the village Virat. So the CWs here, because from the beginning of the program, they are introducing themselves to the local leaders and all the other actors in the community. When they conduct this Vira, um, they conduct it at a village level. They conduct these fairs, and this is really with the community and not entirely by the CW. So you have parents, you have youth groups also actively participating, volunteering in these events. And I'll share a little bit more about the fair towards the end. Yeah, so the ultimate hope or aim in this cycle is sort of that through this process of taking the workshops, speaking to parents, gaining a deeper understanding about foundational learning themselves, the CWs do become FLN champions in their community, but they also work towards creating parent champions in the community. And the hope is that once you have enough people in the community who are speaking about foundational learning, who are speaking with their children about their learning, who are speaking up at like village spaces and school spaces about foundational learning, the program will be sustainable and will be able to continue forth. Um, yeah, so that's about our CWs. I just have a couple of more slides and then I'll open it up for question and answers. Um, so first is about just making it contextual. So I think a big thing that makes our program very successful is that everything is highly contextualized. One is scheduling itself. So like I was sharing, um, different parents are available at different times. Some of them are working 7 days a week. In most families, I mean, at least half of our families, both parents are working full time. So what we do is we ask the CWs to meet all the parents over a month, but when and where they choose to do it is entirely up to them. So if they have to meet uh, 300 parents over the month, they have to meet around like 75 to 80 parents a week. And they can choose to do this in the mornings, in the evenings. They can choose to do it. Our minimum group size is 4, so parents are able to have peer interaction, and maximum is 20. But they can choose to do it at times and locations and in group sizes that make it the most efficient for them. So, yeah, sometimes our workshops happen under trees. Sometimes they happen in school right after school is over. Sometimes they happen like in the field at the place of agricultural work when parents are taking a lunch break. Sometimes they happen on Sundays and in the morning. And yeah, so all of this is really up to the autonomy of the CW as long as they're sort of able to get it done. And when they have certain locations where they're struggling to find time to get it done with, the block coordinator goes with them, does visits, supports them. They're also able to speak to the local leaders and HMs and teachers to sort of garner their support as well. So in some locations when it's been really hard, the school has also helped to sort of organize a like half an hour after school time to sort of speak to parents. The second is translation and transliteration. So across the districts of even the one state that we work in, we have around 4 different languages that parents speak. So even though our material is for children to master English, maths, and Tamil, which are the foundational learning subjects taught in school, we ensure that the materials we make are translated into all the languages that parents are able to speak. I know that sometimes translation is really hard to get access to like good translators. So what we also do is we leverage the school network. So more often than not, teachers who work in the districts where parents speak different languages are also fluent in the languages themselves. So we're able to sort of garner their support to help us with the translation. And we also have transliteration for the English bits on the resources, which I'll show you in just another slide. And the final bit is just contextual activities. So both in the workshop where we conduct activities, as well as the activities that parents do with children are highly contextualized. And this is possible because one, we have the CW from the context of the community itself. They're able to tell us like how much time will a parent have, what sort of materials will they have easy access to, and we also do very regular home visits and community visits. Um, Yes, some of the things that we've learned are that our CEWs predominantly travel to workshops by walk or by a two-wheeler, so we can't have them carrying large materials. Everything may also not be readily available, so we can't really have them like using having to have 400 copies of the same material for each parent. So more often than not, our workshops have activities that just have really easy to procure materials like newspapers or chalk, um, and that they're able to use with the parents. And likewise for activities with parents at home, they largely revolve around materials that you would be able to really easily find. We also ensure that we're doing the creation and ideation of these activities itself with our team of CEWs and our block coordinators, so that we're really ensuring that we're not forgetting about this during the process of ideation. Um, yeah, so I'm just going to share some examples of the resources. So just yeah, if you notice here, we do have like instructions for parents before they sort of get into the activity. We also have the transliteration here. So for this activity here, parents are supposed to ask children to name the objects, and in case the parent does not know the names of these objects in English, we have them the transliteration of them in Tamil here, so they can check to see if the child is saying it correctly. um, the next thing is just we do at the end of every resource packet that we give parents, have a quick section for these are conversations that you can have with your child this month. So it's in Tamil, but I'll translate. These are just like, what was your day like today? What did you learn? What subject did you like? What subject was easy or difficult for you? And also just some questions around like, what were you doing with your friends today? Or like, what was like fun for you? So that we're also building parent-child relationship without it feeling like a school situation, like sort of being interrogated, and that the child is still feeling safe and comfortable while speaking about learning, because we've noticed that this is a very new practice for a lot of parents. Um, this is material for our CEWs who are taking, so this is sort of the workshop plan that they use when they speak to parents. We do have a structure for our workshop, which we call the 6 Ps. So it always starts with like a play activity, and then the CWs present some information and check for understanding, and then parents sort of practice what they've learned before they go on. So yeah, some things that we've just learned is that it's really helpful to sort of have like a visual aid or a poster when they're presenting key information. So we always have just 3 key points for every workshop that we conduct, and we have a visual representation of it. We also just, if you notice in the plan itself, we sort of have a gray checkbox. So this is for the CW when they are conducting the workshop. In like once they're done with every section, they have a quick reflection to think about, hey, did I ensure that everyone was sharing? Did I appreciate parents? Did I check their understanding? So if they haven't, they can always go back. So this sort of serves as a quick self checklist. Yeah, and these materials are also available in all the languages that the CWs that it's convenient for the CWs and the block coordinators as well. Okay, I will just go on to have another slide or two. Just a quick brief overview about the village viras. So we conduct the village viras around once in 6 months. And these are really conducted with the community, and not like for the community by the CEW. So you have community participation right from design, fundraising, sponsoring, volunteering, and putting this together. So just we notice in the picture here, you have parents who are volunteering with conducting events. Um, these sort of shamianas are donated by the village local leaders, or they're procured from shops, or if they are for a price, people often fundraise for it in the communities itself. The structure of the viras itself look like we have speeches by community leaders who speak about education in their life, the importance of foundational learning for them. We have parents and children participate. Sometimes children speak about their experience in the program. Sometimes they speak in English just to showcase what they've learned. And of course, there is dance and music and games for everyone. And the final thing, something that we've learned, especially with the village and rural, semi-rural setup, is that when you hold the viras in an open space, people tend to come more. So it's not so much so like there is an event that you invite people to at a particular time and they turn up, but the moment you have the speakers and there's sound and there's music, people are sort of naturally drawn to the space. So we always ensure that our viras happen in an open space, and that's the moment the speakers go on, the crowd goes from like 20 to 150. Um, yeah. Here, just quick some testimonials on the ground. I'm not going to spend too much time. I'll be on each slide for like 5 to 10 seconds. Okay, I'm just moving to the next slide. I think Priyanka will also share the deck with you guys post session, so you can take a longer look at it then. Yeah, and these are just some impact data as well. well from our program that you can go through later. I just want to close with what has really made our program work. It would be the three C's. One is contextualize. And I think the way we do it is, I mean, from having CWs who are from the context to the materials, the activities we design, the time and location, everything is based on context and what works for parents. The second is consistency. Most of you who work with parents may have noticed that it's really difficult to get parents to sometimes come on time to sort of get them to engage with the program that's new. So what we've noticed really works is just how consistent the CW is in their communication and calling parents and how much that builds parent relationships. We had a CW once share that there was a parent who wasn't sure if the program was going to be helpful or interesting, but the CW turned up at her house every day to speak to her about it, even when she didn't open the door. And on like day 3 or 4, she was like, okay, if you are going to spend half an hour every day because you think my child's education is so important, I'm going to hear what you have to say. And that, yeah, and I think finally it's just community, right? And how much you're working with the community. I think that's been a big learning for me. When we initially started the program, we would try to do all the events ourselves. From sort of conducting workshops to the Viras. And what I've really learned through it is that the more you're just able to ask the community for help or sort of own it as a community responsibility, it becomes one automatically. So even from our workshops or getting parents together in one place, we have parent volunteers who assume the responsibility once it's given to them, and as well as conducting the viras and fairs as well. So I think that really goes a long way in building just community ownership and accountability. And we've noticed that like after a year or so, parents start asking themselves, hey, can we conduct another fair? Can we do it together? Because they know that it's all possible. Um, yeah, I think that is largely about it. My email ID is at the bottom. If you guys have any other questions you want to ask me after today's call, feel free to drop me an email. But I will stop presenting here and I think we can open it up for questions.
Thanks, Rika. Lots of questions for you in the chat. I'm going to try and bucket them in some format, but there may be some that we may not be able to get to. So, as you're sort of like going through all the questions, just take a note of maybe questions that we haven't been able to answer, and we can take that up offline on email as well. But I'm going to try my best to ask as many questions in the time that we have. So, one set of questions is around sort of like time and sustainability. So, questions around how long does the program last for? How much training do you give to parents in terms of just their time commitment in attending these workshops? How long does a CEW sort of work with the community? And sort of what happens when they leave the community? So just a bunch of questions around time and sustainability. So I'll just stop now in case you want to quickly sort of like touch on that, and then we can go to the second set of questions.
Yeah, sure. So I think the workshops in that sense are around 30 to 45 minutes long. But the CW also, I think in some locations, we know that parents may only have like 20 to 30 minutes. And so the CW really knows which are the like key places to pick out and speak about. But yeah, by and large, I think after a month or two, we notice that parents are sort of accustomed to having 30 to 45 minutes to sit down here. And usually when they come, it's always like, we don't have this much time. But once they're here, they don't want to leave. So I think, again, that's something that with consistency really becomes a lot easier to do. Um, with respect to sustainability, so we do a year of workshops before we sort of get into a different mode of when we work with the school more. So the workshops are largely about parent awareness and parent agency. And I think by the end of a year, what we hope to do is that all parents will be able to articulate the importance of foundational learning, be able to articulate learning in terms of outcomes and goals that their child has mastered or is yet to master. And after that, our work really gets a lot more into working with schools, working with school management committees. There is also something that happens called a Grama Sabha, which happens around 6 times a year at a village level, where the entire village sort of gets together to discuss challenges and issues and where they'd like to see funds go. So, yeah, after that, we sort of really get into leveraging these spaces a lot more. So that's on that. I also just saw a question around gender patterns and parent engagement. Yes, I think today almost 95 to 97% of the parents who attend are mothers. That is a trend that we're noticing. It just also happens that usually the work split looks like the fathers work in factories and the mothers work in the agricultural fields. So the fathers are they leave at like 6:30 and they come back at like 9 p.m. 7 days a week, and that's much farther away from their homes. So it's also a little more challenging for us to even be able to reach them, which is where we're hoping to leverage WhatsApp and IVRS because the smartphones more often than not happen to be with the father than with the mother. But we do have some fathers who attend our programs and a lot more who look at our WhatsApp messages and respond. Yeah, Priyanka, was there anything?
Yeah, there's some questions around sort of how does this program sort of fit in with like the larger education framework within India? So questions around when you prepare these learning kits, do they map to the standardized school curriculum or are they tailored to the needs of the community? Even with the parenting kits that you're preparing, is there the larger goal around government adoption or how are you thinking about that? And third question around sort of this vein was around how can CEW become a part of the SMCs as per sort of like education policies within India? So if you want to quickly
Sure.
touch up on.
Yeah. So I think with respect to the SMC is a structure that is in the legal framework in the Right to Education Act. So every school is mandated to have one across the country. The the schools do adapt the SMCs to the needs. So if it's a small school, sometimes they have all the parents in the SMC. But in larger schools, you usually have a cap around 20-25 members in the SMC who turn up. And every month for the SMC, the government does share some information that needs to be spoken about. Sometimes it's around child safety, sometimes it's around like child helpline numbers, so on and so forth. Um, and each SMC does have a space for non-government organization members to be a part of the SMC as well. So really anyone who's part of the community who's interested in being a part of the SMC can approach the school, but this information is not really well known among a lot of people. So in some cases, our CWs are also parents of children in the school, and so they directly enroll in the SMC as a parent. In some cases, if they're not, then they approach the headmistress and ask if they can be a member as part of the non-governmental organization. Since each CW works with around 300 to 400 parents, they oversee around 3 to 4 schools. Um, and so they're part of the SMC in only one of the schools. Unfortunately, all the SMC meetings happen at the exact same time across the state, like the last Monday of the Monday of the first week every month. So you can only be a part of one. You won't be able to attend at more than one school. But yeah. With respect to the curriculum framework, yes, we do map the materials that we share with parents to the state curriculum framework. And the state curriculum framework, in that sense, is designed and derived from the national curriculum framework, from international frameworks that exist. What we share with parents is a simplified version of the framework, though, because at school, at least, they have almost like 60 to 70 learning outcomes for children. Um, and we're picking the ones that are easiest for parents to track and that they'll be able to support their children with the most. We also provide parents with a small checklist of these outcomes. I'll see if I can attach that in the email to you, Priyanka. Maybe you can share it with when the mail that goes out post today's call as well.
And maybe like two more questions around the CEWs, CEVs, which is around the criteria of selecting these community volunteers. I know you briefly touched upon them, but if you can just talk a little bit more about that and sort of how do you keep them incentivized?
Sure. So, yeah, I think when we hire CWs, what we're really looking for is just one, like an interest and motivation. And I know that's like really hard for me to like quantify, but we do have an interview structure, um, for the CWs to really understand why it is that they want to do this role. The second thing that we look for is a basic understanding of at least their community, right? So, like, have they been around? Do they know who the local leaders are? Have they sort of worked in any capacity at a community level before? The third thing we look for is like the basic ability to read and write. So that's largely it. Um, Again, while our CW hiring is not gender specific, we have noticed that it's more often than not women who apply to be CWs. And I mean, at the moment, currently, 100% of our CWs are women. Um, in terms of sort of the continuity of the CWs and preventing them from dropping out, we usually have the most attrition in the first couple of weeks. So as soon as their training is over and they hit the field and they get a sense of what it's like to sort of go into the communities and speak to parents, we have some attrition. It's never been more than like 20%. And we always replace the CWs. I think there was a question around what happens when the CW like drops out. So we do up until the cycle of the program, we do replace the CWs in case there is attrition. Um, and I think incentives, we do it in two ways. Yes, there is, I think, recognition, appreciation by the block coordinator. But what we've noticed, very similar to parents in that sense, really what brings the CWs back or makes them stay is the community and friendships that they're able to build within the team. I think just really having yeah, the space to sort of own something. And if you read the testimonial in the PPT as well, you note that this is something a lot of our CW say, which is that when they go to the communities to speak to parents, they are referred to as teachers. And I think just the tag of like being a teacher is something that really fills them with pride. And so they do feel like, okay, we're contributing to a larger cause. We're seen as someone who is respected in the community. Parents, like whenever they walk through, parents invite them home, ask them to drink tea or like have water or eat something and go on. I think it's really is that sort of the relationships they're able to form, the position they're able to hold, and sort of the love and kindness they receive from the community that really keeps them going, much more than like a gift could do in a meeting in that sense.
Awesome. Thank you, Purvika. There are a bunch of other questions which I'll just collate and I'll send it to you over email and we
Sure.
can take it offline. But if you're around for a little bit longer, if you just want to take some time to respond to them on
Yeah, I
chat,
can do that.
that would be great. But on the pieces around fathers' engagement, I think this is one we have a separate session also where we're going to unpack this a little bit more. But it's also going to come up in the second sort of presentation, which we're going to do with Learn to Play and Kids Collab. So we'll come back to some of those questions. And as you're kind of going through that presentation as well, if you have more reflections around that, please keep them coming. But just in the interest of time and moving forward, I'd like to invite Priyanka Handaram. She is the founder and CEO of Learn to Play. And I'd invite Whitney Richardson, who is the director at Kids Collab, to talk more about their community-oriented program, which is around the parent play box, which they'll talk more about. So over to both of you to take us through the second set of presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Priyanka. And yes, hello to everybody who's joined us today. Just to briefly introduce ourselves, I'm Whitney Richardson from Kids Collab, and Priyanka Handaram has also joined us from Botswana. She's from Learn to Play. I am just going to share my screen with you. Is it showing on the other side?
Yes, it's working.
Thank you. So yeah, just to introduce ourselves. So we are two organizations. Kids Collab is based in South Africa. And as I mentioned, Learn to Play is from Botswana. And we essentially came together to develop this program because we saw that there is a massive need for an intervention within sort of the home care space and trying to improve the outcomes between parents and caregivers and children. As most of you know, less than 19% of children have access to early childhood education in developing countries. And we saw this as an opportunity to bring together these two organizations because we truly believe that caregivers are a child's first teacher and they play a fundamental role in providing both care and protection, but also foundational skills and learning. So through today's discussion with you, you'll see that while our program is quite holistic in its offering, it really also helps build the foundations for early literacy and numeracy and develops those building blocks that children need to prepare them going into school. So just in terms of the coming together of two organizations, we decided to combine our fields of expertise. I'm going to hand over to Priyanka to give you a brief overview of Learn to Play. But essentially, we came together because we saw that there is a meeting point between health and well-being and physical development and that of early childhood education. And so I'm going to ask Priyanka if she can touch on Learn to Play, and then I'll speak briefly over Kids Collab.
Perfect. Thank you, Whitney. And thank you, Priyanka from GSF as well. And it was really great to learn from Purvika about the Madhi Foundation as well. So Learn to Play is based in Botswana, where 3 in 4 children do not have access to early childhood education. I know when we think of Botswana, we often think of diamonds in the Delta, but the realities on the ground are very different. We've got 75% of children not accessing early childhood education. 84% of children every year are born to single mother households. And unfortunately, we are one of the world's unhappiest country. And I don't think we are unique in this position. There are 400 million children across the African continent who are at risk of poor social and emotional health in the next kind of 30 years. And that's really what we are here to solve. And we know that in the most formative years of child development, so in the first 5 years, we can actually transform children's coping mechanisms, build their resilience, as well as their foundational learning skills. And so we provide play groups, which we train mothers in communities, unemployed mothers in communities, to lead and run on a daily basis. We also have our parenting program in partnership with Kids Collab, which is what we'll be sharing today. And we have a children's mental health program called the Mindful Way, which takes elements of mindfulness and brings them to young children in a very playful and age-appropriate method. So I think maybe I'll just stop there and let Whitney tell you a bit more about Kids Collab, and we'll take you into the parent playbooks.
Thank you, Priyanka. So very briefly, Kids Collab, we are a South African nonprofit organization, and we really are champions of early childhood development, but through the power of play. A huge focus of ours is physical development and fundamental movement skills. That was the core of why we started this program. We believe that fundamental movement skills and physical activity are at the core of the building blocks to a child who is able to thrive, and helping them be prepared going into a schooling environment. So we focus on the early years. We have the Parent Playbox, which is one of our main programs, but then we also have a school program that focuses on physical development and well-being, where we capacitate early childhood educators to understand and to have the knowledge of how to improve fundamental movement skills in a child's typical day. And then we also filter this through into community spaces through a program called Play Parks, where we capacitate local leaders with our program, very similar to the school program, where they are trained up on physical activity and fundamental movement skills, and we support them in providing safe spaces for children to get active on a weekly basis. So we give them the lesson plans, the resources that they may need, and then they host these play sessions on a weekly basis. All of our projects are done in collaboration with implementation partners, which allows us to scale and to also obviously have the contextual relevance within the communities that we are working with. So why we're here today, the Parent Playbox is a comprehensive program. It's designed to empower parents and caregivers working with children ages birth to 6 years. And we really try to provide caregivers with the confidence, knowledge, tools, and resources that they may need. A huge component for us is we believe that many of the communities that we work with, they would never have the means in terms of the actual program, but then also the resources needed in order to stimulate their children. So the training, the resources, and the knowledge base is really what we focus on with this program. And then in terms of the outcomes of this, these are our core components. So enhancing parent-child engagement and bonding, improving early childhood development, increasing parental confidence and skills, strengthening community cohesion, empowering caregivers as child's first educator, improving school readiness for children, and then also allowing for sustainable home-based learning in low-resource settings. So a question that we often get asked with is, we go into these communities and we capacitate local leaders or grassroots organizations with our program, and they receive all the resources, and they do the program for an entire year, and then what happens after that? And how we see the program is that we're providing the parents and caregivers with the skills and the knowledge and the resources. But the idea is that beyond that year of the project, they will really have the knowledge of how to carry that through into a child's everyday life. And so through our activities and through knowledge sharing, we try and help parents and caregivers understand how they can integrate play into a child's everyday life, even if they didn't have the resources within the Parent Playbox. It's simple things such as getting your child involved with daily chores. So, for example, color coding when you're doing the washing, or getting a child involved in cooking activities, including basic literacy and numeracy and those components, And so we really try and focus on this both within our training and within the activities that we provide the parents and the caregivers. Then in terms of the actual program, so the Parent Play Box is based on the Rainbow Play approach developed by Learn to Play. This framework really uses play as a fundamental element in all areas of learning, well-being, and development. So it focuses on social and emotional learning, sensory development, fine and gross motor development, pre-literacy and communication, cognitive thinking, and creativity and imagination. And so all of our activities, when the parents receive their activity cards or their videos, they'll always be able to understand or to be able to link which areas of a child's development are which areas the activities are focused on. Often you'll find that obviously it crosses more than one, but we really try and keep this as our core focus for all of the activities within our program. In terms of the actual makeup of the Parent Play Box, so one play box would have 52 weekly activities and play prompts based on the holistic Rainbow Play approach. It's 52 activities for ages birth to 24 months, and then 24 months plus to the 5-6 year mark. Every single play box that we provide will always focus on both of those age groups, because many of the communities, it'll be more than one child in the household. And so if the children are between those age groups, it obviously can cater to both of them. So the actual contents of the Parent Play Box, we provide graphic activity cards, but in conjunction with this, we've also developed videos that do not have text. And this is so that we can also target parents who may not necessarily be literate, or who may be speaking another language. We have slowly started to develop the activity cards into other languages, but in the cases where this is not possible, we've obviously got these videos to be able to cater for them. We provide resources and materials to be able to do all the activities. There's stories and printables and other variations, guidelines, and learning tools within the Playbox. The image to the left is of a group that we did our pilot study with in Dukwi refugee camp in 2022. This is the original version of the Parent Play Box. It has now transformed into a bag format, just to ease the logistical burden of the Parent Play Box for the parents within these communities. And then just to touch on the training. So when we started with the Parent Play Box, we had more of a direct implementation where we would go in and train communities ourselves. However, it has shifted now to a training of the trainer model. And this is really speaking to the idea of having a locally led program that can be adopted by communities. So in this instance, we would go in and we would do a training of the trainer model, typically 2 to 3 days of training with local grassroots organizations or larger organizations who already have an existing presence within a community. Often what we'll do is we'll try partner with organizations who obviously have built trust within those communities, who perhaps have existing programs, and who already have a core mandate of either improving early childhood education or focusing on education in general with children in the community. As an example, in South Africa, we've got a fantastic implementation partner called Sikula Sonke. They are a grassroots organization who have been involved in Khayelitsha, which is a big informal settlement in South Africa, one of our largest. And they have a number of ECD programs existing. However, they were looking to strengthen their involvement with the parents and the caregivers within the communities that they were working with. And so they approached us to implement the Parent Play Box. And so what we did is we went and did a 2-day training with all of their facilitators. And after that, those facilitators are now able to lead the program within their community. So within the training, a facilitator for the parent play box would be able to cover all of our monitoring and evaluation, the rainbow play approach. They'd be able to focus on the parent caregiver games focused on early childhood development, the importance of play, as well as being able to do demonstrations of the parent play box activities. And then outside of that, we obviously provide the continual support to those facilitators within our implementation partner setup. And those facilitators are able to support the parents and caregivers within the communities. Just to give you some visuals, so the image to the left are, those are the facilitators from Sikolo Sonke, who were taking part in the 2-day training of the trainer model. And then to the right, you can see how that's now translated into a parent play box training for the parents and the caregivers. And you can see the women who are standing up, those are all the facilitators who we have trained. So it's been extremely successful so far. All of those parents and caregivers would have received their parent play box that day. And what's wonderful about Sikolo Sonke is that they offer home visits and they also do cluster workshops. So the home visits happen typically once every 2 weeks, where the facilitators will go around to the communities and provide support for the mothers and the fathers and the caregivers. And obviously now they're also able to touch on the parent play box while they're doing those visits. And then the cluster workshops happen once a month, where they'll often have different topics for the parents and caregivers, whether it's focusing on fatherhood, sort of prenatal care for mothers perhaps. But now again, they will often touch on the parent play box as well, and they'll use our activities to engage with the parents and caregivers, even for those who haven't gone through the training themselves or received the resources. These are some images from some of the home visits. So you'll see this is now in action, where parents and caregivers are actually engaging in our play-based activities with their children. These are some more images. So this is a implementation of one of our trainings in Dukwi refugee camp. You can see this is the version of the parent play box in the bag. And these are some of the caregivers who went through the training with Priyanka. Those are some of our resources. The image top right, second from the right. Typically, it's resources that most of these caregivers would not necessarily normally have access to. And so it's a wonderful additional component for them to be able to engage with their children. Sorry, before I play this, so this is a clip that Priyanka was able to get from one of our fathers who went through our training and who has been implementing the parent play box with his child. So this is just his take on the importance of the program for him as a parent.
Ndio sisi kama wazazi tumeona hii play box imekuwa ya maana sana kwetu, kwa sababu kitu cha kwanza tumekuja kuona ni elimu. Imefundisha wazazi kuwa na ukaribu na watoto, na imekwenda kufungua watoto wetu kuwa na mapenzi pamoja na wazazi kuwa na mapenzi kwa pamoja. Na vile vile wazazi wengine wanapata elimu kupitia jinsi sisi tulivyoanza kucheza na watoto.
I'm now going to hand over to Priyanka, who's going to go into this next section of the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Whitney. So when we look at emerging literacy for early childhood, some of the things that we're looking at include phonological awareness, which is really just, you know, things of understanding sounds of a language, so understanding rhyming sounds, understanding that, you know, like games like I Spy, so they don't actually need to know how to read or write yet, but just phonological awareness of sounds. It might be things to do with clapping out syllables, and just the sounds and rhythms and patterns of what a language sounds like. We also look at alphabet knowledge, so being able to understand that there are letters of the alphabet, whatever language they're learning that in, and that corresponds. So there's some correspondence now to the phonological awareness of sounds and then the print letters. And that links us to the concepts of print, which is not only reading and writing, but it's also simple things like directionality, being able to follow from left to right, knowing which way the pages of a book turn, what is the front, what is the back. So there's or even how pictures and images can tell a story. So just simple things like that are concepts of print that we're looking at in the 0 to 5 age group. Then emergent writing, and that's not necessarily, again, writing whole words or names, but it can also just be the early attempts at drawing. Or I remember when my kids were growing up, they'd scribble something and say, "Mommy, I wrote you a letter." So that concept of when I put some kind of scribble on a paper, it actually means some words. And so that's what we mean by emergent writing. And then listening comprehension, so following instructions, understanding and engaging with stories, songs, rhymes. And that can be both through listening, it can also be through retelling or reading. So that's really what we're looking for in early childhood education as the building blocks towards foundational literacy and then fluency in reading and writing later. And these come through engagement through play, it comes through story time, it comes through talking to your child, it comes through singing, it comes through all these sorts of different games that are not necessarily book related. So literacy in the early years in particular is not necessarily about reading and writing, but actually about all the building blocks that help you get to fluency in reading and writing. So I think, Whitney, if you don't mind changing screen, we can talk about an activity. So this is one of our activities, and you can see it's color-coded green, which is a gross motor development game. Sorry.
Sorry.
No worries. But this is what an activity card looks like. But I know Whitney's explained that alongside the activity cards, or sometimes in complete replacement of the activity cards, we have these language neutral videos. And Harriet, I did see your question, so I'll get to that at the end when we talk about our community model. But if a parent playbox had the activity cards as the approach, this would be what the activity card looks like. So there's 3 or 4 simple steps, the materials that are required, and then how to do the activity. So in this particular one, there are some there are some story prompt cards. There's an elephant, a leaf, 2 eyes, a tree, a paw print, and these are cut out, and the parent is guided to tell a story, to create their own story using these picture cards. And the child is jumping in a shopping bag to go and collect these picture cards and then repeat the story. So to make this come alive, we're going to show you what this looks like in a facilitator training in Uganda, where we were training early childhood facilitators, community-based facilitators who would then engage with parents and train parents. But just so you see how this is an early literacy activity as well.
Swinging his trunk to and fro. Munching, crunching, tearing trees. Stamping seeds, eating leaves.
Awesome. So you can hear that I'm telling her a story. She listens to certain clues or words from the story. She goes, she jumps, she picks them up in the right order and puts them back. What you don't see is after that, she has to retell the story in her own words, and she puts the pictures out. And then if I was the parent in this situation, it would be my turn to jump in the bag and go and collect the picture clues and put it in the bags. And so through play and engagement in that way, we're building early literacy, storytelling skills, listening comprehension, and then sequencing as well. But here's some feedback from some of the parents that have been engaged in the Parent Playbox, specifically related to foundational or emergent literacy. So one parent says, you know, the child learns to use their fingers, they can talk more, they're expressing themselves, they speak in full sentences, they ask questions. So it's built a lot of verbal confidence and oral language skills as well. And then the other says, you know, they're starting to learn their letters of the alphabet, so phonics exposure. So they're starting to understand the phonics sounds of A for apple. Sorry, I think there's a lag on my end, so I'm not seeing the things come up immediately. But another parent speaks about how my child draws now. He used to just sit, but now he draws, he colors. He's starting to tell me what pictures mean, so that emergent kind of representation of storytelling, literacy, and print. So everything that we've talked about so far has been where each parent receives their own parent playbox. And that's kind of how we've been doing things for the last 3 to 4 years. But going forward, we've actually adapted the parent playbox to a community playbox. And this is a much more scalable and cost-effective version of the same thing. So now, instead of a parent receiving a playbox, a community education volunteer, similar to Madhi, or it could be a social worker, will get a community playbox, and that one box will support a group of 20 to 25 families. So there are obviously a few more of every resource in that box, but not necessarily 25 of everything. So in the part, I'll give you an example of a ball. So if every family was going to get their own parent play box, we'd have to do 25 balls in all of those, you know, parent play boxes. But now we might do 5, and then it's in a community play box, and they'll break into groups and they're playing these activities together. So sorry. So the community playbox now runs every fortnight, where parents and caregivers come together with a social worker or a community education volunteer, and the community volunteer runs the activity with the parents and children together in a community setting. The parents and children practice that activity in that joint setting, and then are encouraged to replicate or adapt it when they go home. So they don't take the parent playbox home. They don't get their own set of resources in this model like they do in the parent playbox model, but they're still practicing all the activities, building their knowledge and skills, building their confidence to engage with children, having all the same outcomes, but in this community setting. So what we're finding with that is, and this is just a trial, is that it's enhancing peer support and belongingness in the community, a lot more accountability as well in doing things together. And then the parents are practicing and then adapting when they go home. And this brings me to kind of what do we do when parents don't have, you know, all parents can't access that video on WhatsApp. This is how we've tried to navigate that problem, is that a community education volunteer or a social worker will receive the videos, will have all the videos on WhatsApp and the activity cards. And then they demonstrate the activity live to the parents, and the parents are practicing that activity in that community-based setting, so that the parents are not receiving the videos directly in this instance. So that's you know, kind of how this has come about. It's also come about because of a big push and request from implementing partners who don't have the capacity to do individual parent play boxes, don't have the capacity to support with home visits. So with Sekula Sonke, they already had a parenting program in place. So it fit into things that they were already doing. They had these parent peer support groups. They had home visits that they were already doing. So the parent play box is built into existing systems there. Whereas this is more for organizations who I saw a comment in the chat about somebody who does coffee sessions with parents. So for example, this might work in a coffee session where you've already got a parent group that you're meeting with every 2 weeks, and now you're training the parents and doing this game with the parents in that coffee session, and then they go home and they repeat and replicate and adapt with their children. So I think that brings me to the end of the presentation. And I know we've got lots of questions, but we've also got an activity to do. So Priyanka from GSF, if you don't mind just explaining, just to remind me, are we going straight into the Q&A? Are we going to do the activity and then the Q&A? So
I think we can do the Q&A first and then do a more like condensed version of the activity, perhaps in 5 to 7 minutes.
that's perfect. And then, so I think what I did want to add about the community playbox and how it's being adapted in different countries is, so some countries are looking at the resource list and then adapting it to be more culturally relevant or community contextualized. So for example, you know, in Uganda, in the video you saw, we normally do a little ball. They've asked if they can just make their balls out of banana leaves, and it absolutely works. So we work with the implementing organization in each different country to look at what is going to work for them in their context. And as long as it's not changing the learning objectives or the outcomes of the activity, we work with them to replace the resources to be a more contextually friendly playbox. I think, you know, I can't remember exactly all the adaptations we've made, but they've not been many. I think there have been like a couple of things. Sometimes we've changed names. So there are stories, and there might be like a Southern African name that we've had in the original parent playbox, and then we've changed that to a more East African name just so that it's culturally relevant. And so those are minor changes that we make on the kind of activity cards or the examples we're giving. But I'm also, Whitney, if you want to jump in, if there's any other kind of adaptations that you can remember that we've had to make for how communities are contextualizing this to really make this their own.
No, I think you've touched on it. I think it is always minor components. I think it's, you know, just when we go in and we work with these communities or these grassroots organizations who are running the program on the ground, it's that initial period when we do the training to really understand, for us to meet those communities where they're at, in order to make those changes. So I think that's enough information on that. But one aspect I did want to touch on was, we often get asked whether the parents or caregivers need a background in understanding certain components of the parent playbox or what level of education they typically have. And a big part of this project is to ensure that any parent or caregiver is able to do this program at home with their children. And so, you know, whether it's that they never went to school, that they didn't finish school, through the training that they receive from our grassroots organizations, our implementation partners, or whether they go through the community-led model, any parent can take part. And we do this obviously through the training and through the support. They feel like they have a hands-on approach with the project. And obviously also through the fact that, you know, if they aren't able to read and write, you know, they are able to access the videos or go to the community sessions as well. So I just wanted to mention that, as I think that's an important component of the project.
Awesome. And then I see that there's a question about the self-reported feedback from the parents. So the feedback that we shared is self-reported, but we had a master's student who was doing her thesis on the parent playbox out of one of the universities in Norway. And so she came and she did a lot of independent research with parents in one of our groups, and she did it across the period of a year, where she did like baseline focus group discussions, kind of midline journal prompts where parents were journaling, and that journaling didn't have to be written, it was sometimes voice notes, and then a kind of end line. And so some of this feedback was tracked through that, but yes, self-reported. In addition to that, we do have a kind of M&E framework that Whitney alluded to as part of the training. So that has components initially on change in parent knowledge and confidence pre and post the training, the one-day training that we offer the parents. And then when we've done direct implementation, we've done other kind of tracking to look at parent engagement. So for example, if we do have the WhatsApp groups active, we'll do little prompts on the WhatsApp group to look at enjoyment and engagement after each week or every fortnight. We also ask parents to share videos or pictures back. And so through that, we're also able to kind of track understanding and engagement at the same time. But other organizations, implementing partners, have done different things to track, and it just depends on what their objectives have been. So we've got tools that we offer them to use, but we don't insist on it for implementing partners. And then some choose to do kind of their own research. And Whitney, I mean, in South Africa, Kids Collab has worked with multiple different implementing partners, so she might be able to share a little bit more about the M&E from a partner side.
I think just in terms of the M&E and MOL from our side, the biggest thing is that we obviously just try to keep it as simple as possible, just so that it is something that is followed through throughout the entire project. And we often work with the implementation partners. If they feel like there's anything else that they need to monitor and evaluate, then obviously we work with them and our learning partner to make sure that we do cover that. I think otherwise Priyanka touched on most of it. I just saw a question here from Lumu Robert regarding the idea of parents learning how to develop their own playbox. So I think this goes back to earlier on in the presentation, I alluded to the fact that through the playbox, we want to create a sustainable approach where parents are able to engage with their children once they've completed all of the activities within the playbox. I think often for a parent or caregiver, it's quite overwhelming in terms of not understanding what to do with their children in order to focus on early childhood education. And so we're really trying to use the playbox as a tool to capacitate them to actually engage with their children and to build and develop on the relationship between parent and child. So we see the playbox by us providing it to them with the knowledge and the resources that it gives them sort of that confidence. And then beyond that, they are able to facilitate their own ideas of play because they've done our project. I don't know if there are any other questions here that you've seen, Priyanka.
There was one question around funding and partnerships, and if you have made partnerships with social welfare ministries and basic education departments to access funding, resources, material for the program.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find that.
That was the question by Nolan.
Oh, there we go. Do you source your own funding to do and expand on your reach? Yes, it's currently we've been sourcing all of our own funding through either grants, by reaching out to corporates, philanthropic partners. We haven't run any of this through basic education department. So it's typically what happens is that we will find a ideal implementation partner, we'll develop a proposal together, and then we'll take that to someone who could potentially fund the project and get it privately funded that way. I don't know, Priyanka, from your side in Botswana, if there are any other ways that
so
you...
our direct implementation has been self-funded, like we've found direct funding for it. But with implementing partners in other countries, they have found the funding for the parent playbox in their community or context, and then invited Learn to Play in as a training partner. So we train, this, like, I'll give Tanzania as an example. We've trained a group of schools in Tanzania to implement the parent playbox. So they paid for the training. It's a once-off cost to pay for the training and for us to be there. And then after that, they're licensed to use the parent playbox. And the organization is trained on how to build the parent playbox as well. So they make their own parent playboxes in Tanzania. They don't have to get them from us. So it's just it's a really simple once-off cost, and there's no recurring cost either. So there's no recurring licensing fee or anything like that. They just pay the once-off cost for the TOT model, and then they get all of that training and support in that time. We have in this pilot phase where we've got implementing partners in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda, we've made ourselves available to them on a monthly call every, like I said, every month, where we can give them further support, answer questions, troubleshoot with them, be a part of their WhatsApp groups if they've needed us to. So that's kind of an additional benefit that we've tried to offer some of our implementation partners.
Awesome. Thank you, Priyanka and Whitney. I don't think we'll have time for the activity, but thank you so much. I think the engagement was great. Lots of good questions. So I'm hoping the attendees were able to take a lot of insights from this discussion. But we did want to do activity and wanted to do a short sort of reflection exercise with all of you. We won't have time to do it, but I just wanted to leave you with the questions anyway, as you're kind of going to sign out soon. Think about sort of like your own community assets, which already exist in your communities that can help support literacy development of children, and what would it take to activate some of these assets. Would have loved to hear from some of you. But before we wrap up, we have like one question that we wanted to do an independent reflection with you on before we sign out for today, which is we talked a lot about sort of from our individual program perspective, what are some of the things that might work, but also just wanted to take a couple of seconds to zoom out and think about what can we do together as a community. So just kind of looking ahead, what kind of support from your peer and system actors would enable you to embed a community-led approaches within your programs more effectively? We probably have time for one person to come off mute if they can and share their reflection. If anybody wants to kind of just talk about more from a community perspective, what is it that's going to help us build more sustainable community-led programs? Would love to kind of hear from maybe one person. I'm also parallelly going to open a poll, which is just for us to get feedback on today's session, but it also has this question. So if you are unable to come off mute, please do leave your responses there. But would love to hear from maybe like one person before we wrap up for the day.
चल चलते हैं चल हाँ चक्कर लगी इटे 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 इटे
I've lost